That's not even the name of the fucking documentary. The Arsenal All or Nothing documentary. Now, I'll give my overall thoughts about it after I finish what I'm going to speak about. But it came out. Everyone was waiting in angst to watch his documentary, because considering the season that Arsenal had last year, it was bound to be entertaining. And I thought the best way to look at it is by looking at 5 things. So, by looking at 5 things we learnt. I learnt 5 things that I took out of Arsenal All or Nothing documentary. So, the Arsenal All or Nothing documentary, 5 things I learnt. Now, number 1 has to be Mikel Arteta is a bizarre genius. I think is probably the best way to describe him. We all saw, if you'd watched the documentary or you saw on Twitter, the whole heart and the brain holding hands and the little drawings that he does, and these other little quirks, like with the light bulb, plugging it in, saying like a connected team and whatever. Now, a lot of people, maybe not making fun of it or mocking it, but I watched that documentary and have come out of it with a very, very positive opinion on Mikel Arteta. I think the way he conducts himself, I think his philosophies are very good, and I every time he spoke and every time he explained something, I felt confident in what he was going to say, and that I felt understanding of what he was going to say. So yeah, I feel like Mikel Arteta is a bizarre genius. I think he's probably the best way. I put that in my run sheet. I feel like that's the best way to describe it. There's just something about him that just ticks. That ticks for me. And while he's not like the most proven manager, I think tactically he's very good. I think we all saw that tactically he lives and breathes football, right? So tactically he's going to be on point. Like the way he sees the game, the way he approaches the game, his philosophy around it is very positive, very attacking, very possession heavy, and very exciting, eccentric. And we've seen it with Arsenal already this season. They've played 4-1-4 and in quite blistering fashion in most games as well. So we've started to see that kind of philosophy that Arteta was trying to implement last year has really come to the fore this year. So Mikel Arteta, if Arsenal fans watched that documentary and didn't come out of it 10 times more confident in their manager, I'd be surprised, because he made a massive case for himself as being one of the best up-and-coming managers in Europe. And yeah, what really struck him about me? No, that's not it. Struck me about him, sure, was not only his tactical management, but his man management as well. I think he obviously can speak a couple of different languages. He speaks Spanish and English obviously very fluently, so he's able to really connect with some of the Brazilian players in the squad, with some of the Portuguese players in the squad. So with that, and also with his relatability, of course, the fact that he's young, only retired a couple of, maybe not a couple of years ago, but he wasn't that long ago retired. So he is relatable to the players, especially some of the older players like Granit Xhaka and Cedric and Lacazette. They can really kind of relate to him in a sense. And he also understands what the likes of Saka and Smith Rowe and even the likes of Sambi Lokonga, who we saw upset that he wasn't playing, one of the few players upset that they weren't playing, which I'll touch on a little bit later. He's able to relate to them and really kind of nurture them and understand where they're coming from, because he was in that position not long ago. In football, while it has changed since Arteta was running around in the mid to late or early 2010s, late 2000s, it's still kind of similar, so he can relate to the players, which I think helps him and will hold him in good stead for a long time. So yeah, that was the number one thing I learned, was that Mikel Arteta is this bizarre genius, that even his quirks and his kind of personality traits aren't traditional. They just seem to work somehow. And yeah, I think that's probably the best way to describe Arteta. So that was number 1. Now, number 2 is that Rob Holding is too happy. He needs to be more angry. Now, for those who saw the episode where it was about him, I think it was one of the last 2 episodes, he's just too happy. He's too happy when he's not playing, which is like, yeah, who cares? He's happy, which is good. You want your players to be happy. But even the producer said at one point, you're the most happiest player in the squad. And while that's good, and this will be something I'll touch on a little bit in depth in my last point, while it's good that he's happy, which is great. He needs to be angry. He's a centre-back who has been in and out of favour at that club, has been at Arsenal for fucking however long, and has never really established a first-team place. Is he content with being a squad player? I don't think a footballer should be content with being a squad player. I think a footballer, especially playing for Arsenal, should drive themselves to be the best player in their position at the club. So for the fact that he's just constantly happy all the time, I'm sure he's living his best life, and I'm sure he's content with playing for Arsenal, earning tens of thousands of pounds a week, doing what he loves, and can't really complain. I feel like there's a level of duty there for him to kind of take it, maybe not more seriously, but kind of demand more from himself and demand more from his team and demand more from his manager to want to play him, because it is kind of just the same thing over and over again with Holding. Is like he plays, gets dropped, and then and then plays again, someone's injured, he plays, then he gets dropped, then he makes substitute appearances in the 85th minute every game, and then he gets dropped, and then he starts because someone's injured. It's this rotating cycle with Rob Holding ever since he came into Arsenal, pretty much. And he's just content with that. I don't really understand it. I feel like for Arsenal, playing for Arsenal Football Club, you need to be motivated to be the best player in your position and be angry at the fact that you're not starting. So I'll touch on this a little bit later on in my last point. But yeah, Rob Holding, too happy. Although if I was earning 30 grand a week playing for Arsenal and not really having to do a whole lot, I'd be happy as well, in all fairness. But let's move on to point 3. And the third thing I learnt from Arsenal's documentary is that Aaron Ramsdale is the future. Now, Arsenal need to be very careful with Ramsdale, and they need to hold on to him as much as they can, because he's the future for them. He's a future England goalkeeper, in my opinion, and he's probably the future Arsenal captain, because what I saw in the documentary I absolutely adored from Aaron Ramsdale. Now, we all know he wasn't in favour, wasn't starting at the start of last year, came in after the Man City game or after the Chelsea game, and has pretty much been the first choice, or has been the first choice ever since then. And what really struck me, I've said that twice and I haven't actually said it properly. What I noticed from Aaron Ramsdale was, I can't remember what game it was. It might have been against Everton, or I can't remember what game it was. But Arsenal won 2-1, comfortable win, no problems. But he was fuming in the dressing room that he copped the goal and didn't keep his clean sheet. Now, I just spoke about Rob Holding being too happy and being too content with his position. That shows the opposite for Aaron Ramsdale. That shows that he wants perfection. And while it's a tight line, you need to walk when being a perfectionist and being that player that is motivated by success and needs to be perfect every single time. I think Ramsdale was treating that really well. And what I saw from him was this motivation, this tenacity, this willing to do anything to be perfect. And when he's not perfect, even if he's a 9 out of 10 when he thinks he should be a 10 out of 10, that will get to him and that will drive him to be better, and that will drive not only him to be better, but that will drive his team to be better, because they're looking at Ramsdale, who, yeah, Arsenal won 5-1, but Ramsdale copped the goal and he's angry that he didn't keep his clean sheet. And he's angry, he's frustrated, he wants to get better. Why can't we do that? I think that's what shocked to me about Ramsdale the most, and we all know his exploits with his feet. We all know he's a pretty good ball-playing goalkeeper. The modern day kind of requires him to be that. And we all know his shot-stopping is very good at times. So, I feel like if he can just touch up a little bit of his goalkeeping game and just be a little bit more reliable, I think he will be definitely the future Arsenal goalkeeper for a decade, probably the next Arsenal captain, and almost most definitely the next England goalkeeper, who probably should be starting at the World Cup. I know he's got some stiff competition with Nick Pope, and Jordan Pickford will always be around that squad, but yeah, definitely on the plane and probably should be starting in Qatar for England, because what I saw in that documentary was very, very pleasing and kind of reassured the fact that it's not a persona. It's not he looks like he cares on the pitch, whereas behind closed doors he doesn't really give a fuck. It's not a persona, it's who he truly is, and he really wants to be the best, and he really wants to show everyone that he is an elite goalkeeper, and he's willing to go to no end to prove that. Tenacious, motivated, angry, willing to do everything to win, and willing to do everything to be perfect. And that's the mentality you need to have to succeed at the highest level. And that's the mentality that Arsenal players need to have to get Arsenal back to where they are. And like I said, I spoke about that with Rob Holding. I'll speak about this a little bit later on in my last point. Some players don't have that same motivation, and that will cost them. So, yeah, that was the third thing I learnt. Now, as I have a quick sip of water here. Right, okay. Number 4. The penultimate thing I learnt, and we were all waiting in angst to watch this episode. We were all waiting in angst to see how this developed. We all know Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. We all know the scenario around him leaving Arsenal or getting pretty much demoted from the first team squad, then leaving Arsenal in January. And the fourth thing I learnt rather is that Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is a spoiled brat. Now, we all know what had happened from an external perspective. We didn't know what happened from an internal perspective, and we got a glimpse of that in the documentary. And basically, he just left them high and dry. He was the club captain. He was the talisman of that squad. And for him to go AWOL and to just be completely disregarding of the first team and really be a selfish footballer really was concerning to see, and also kind of validated a lot of thoughts that I know I had and a lot of people had about him, that he's just this show pony, all about himself, self-righteous person, this pretentious person in a sense. And with all due respect to Aubameyang, because he's a fantastic footballer, he does not have that mental side of the game. Just doesn't. And Arteta was asked when was the moment. The producer asked him something along the lines of, when was the moment you knew you had to drop Aubameyang from the squad? And he was like, from the moment I looked at his eyes and looked that he didn't care anymore. To have that be so transparent, and for that to be, for your feelings to be so transparent that your manager doesn't really need to have a conversation with you, he can just look at you and look at how unmotivated you are and how much you don't care. Not good. And he's over 30 years old, but he's acting like a child. And yeah, I think a lot of people kind of were looking at, Arteta just needs to play Aubameyang, needs to play him. He was their top goal scorer the year before. I know we hadn't been playing well, and this would cost them top 4 and whatever. But I feel like this documentary kind of validated the points of, no, Arteta was well within his rights to drop Aubameyang and was well within his rights to really show no mercy and be like, all right, you don't want to be here, fuck off. And I think that's great. It shows that he's not a pushover. It shows that whatever he says goes, which I think is great. I think is the perfect thing that needs to be happening in that squad, because it's a lot of young players. It's a lot of players who might have an ego on them. It could, because they're so young and playing at such a good high level team and earning a lot of money, there might be a little bit of ego creeping into that squad. So for Arteta to stamp his authority and say, this club captain, top goal scorer, pretty much the best striker we've had ever since Thierry Henry, get out. You're not welcome. If you don't want to play, for the team, get out. So that was another reason why my number 1 point was what it was, because Arteta. Yeah, I came out of the documentary with a lot of positive thoughts on Arteta and a lot of negative thoughts of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. So that's the number 4. And the fifth and final thing that I learnt from the Arsenal All or Nothing documentary is that there is not enough competitiveness in that squad, which ultimately led to their downfall. Now, what I mean by that is, I spoke about it with Rob Holding, Mohamed Elneny, Alexander Lacazette. They don't care enough. That's what it boiled down to. They just did not care enough. And you saw Holding, he was content with sitting on the bench. Elneny, there was a period in the documentary where he was like, if I don't play, I don't play. It is what it is. And even Lacazette, we didn't really hear a lot about him, but he got dropped for Eddie Nketiah and wasn't really shown to be putting in the extra yards, putting in the hard yards to kind of right that wrong. He became snappy. We saw that fight in training, which was caused by him. He became snappy. He became angry at the fact that he wasn't starting, but not in a good way. He wasn't motivated by it. He was just soppy and moping around. So that ultimately led to their downfall, because when you have a squad that is challenging for top 4, while the starting 11 is important, the 7 on the bench and the 4, 5, 6 players, 7 players that aren't in the squad, they're arguably more important because they drive standards. It's all well and good for your first 11 to be exceptional. If the rest of your squad don't care and aren't pushing those players to get better, you're going to stagnate and you're going to plateau. That's what we saw with Arsenal. They got to a level where they were comfortable. The players didn't really care. They thought they would just coast because their spot was secured in a sense. And it ended up leading to their downfall. We saw Lacazette was just playing, didn't want to improve, wasn't really doing a whole lot, and it ended up getting dropped, right? And then you saw with El Neni, right? We saw that last year the midfield mix for Arsenal wasn't quite there. That's because, like we all know, I know El Neni isn't this gifted footballer, but he wasn't driving standards. He wasn't driving Xhaka to get better. He wasn't driving these players to really improve themselves. So that's, in my opinion, what cost Arsenal top four. And after watching that, it was this lack of... After watching the documentary, it kind of validated my thoughts about it. This lack of competitiveness and this lack of want to win and this lack of, oh, I'm going to do everything to win and I'm going to be the best player in my position. I don't care if you've just signed a midfielder for £100 million. I'm going to be the best midfielder in this team. There's none of that in that squad, and that, in my opinion, ultimately led to their downfall. So yeah, those were the 5 things that I came out of the documentary with. If I were to give my overall thoughts now, I think it was a good documentary. I liked it. I thought the production quality was good. I thought we saw the things that we wanted to see. Was it a little bit of a propaganda piece? Yes, because that's what all these documentaries are. You're never going to get an honest documentary like that is produced in the same way that these are produced. We saw with the Tottenham one, pretty much a Jose Mourinho shrine in a sense. But yeah, it was a good documentary. I enjoyed it. I would have liked to see it come out all in one go though, so I didn't have to wait fucking 4 weeks for the whole series to finish. But I enjoyed it. I hope they do another one. I think they are doing another one. I know they did one with City, so I should probably go and watch that. I watched the Tottenham one not long ago. Watch the Arsenal one just then. I know they've got some. I think they've got one on Juventus. I think they've got an Atletico Madrid documentary as well. So probably should go check those out as well. But yeah, I enjoyed the doco. Other things that I learnt from it, Colney is a great training facility. Some of the shit that was there, I was like, what the fuck? Kind of like, okay, like, yeah, weird. The injury issue was quite bizarre. Like, it seemed that they just were getting injured from nowhere, which was weird. Obviously, we saw Ben White was meant to miss only one game. I can't remember. It was like pretty late on in the season. Ben White was meant to miss one game, and then he missed 2, and then he missed like 3, I think. So, I don't know what's happening there. But, yeah, we saw an insight into the Cronkies. Well, Josh, not Stan. Edu I thought was presented pretty well. Arteta, like I said, presented pretty well. Saka, Smith Rowe, the young players were presented well. Nketiah was presented well. I thought Granit Xhaka was presented pretty well. Yeah, I thought a lot of players were presented well in that doco. They did well to kind of protect their own players in a sense. But yeah, I know. Yeah, it was a propaganda piece to an extent because it's never not going to be that. But yeah, it was a pretty good doco. I urge everyone to go watch it, go binge it. All the episodes are out, 8 episodes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes each. Yeah, very good documentary, very interesting and very insightful. I hope they do one about Chelsea. I think they have booked one for another club. I just want to double check that I'm either A, not making this up, or what team it was. It is, if I can find it. They've done a lot. They've done one on New Zealand, on the All Blacks. There you go. Newcastle, here we go. Newcastle in line to feature in Amazon's All or Nothing documentary series. That'll be a good watch. If that happens, I'm assuming that'll happen next season. I don't think it will happen this season that we've just started. If it happens next season, it could be a Newcastle team challenging for top 4 and getting new signings in and all this stuff. So that would be good to see. But yeah, those were my overall thoughts on the documentary. As we move on to our second, I knew this was going to be a lot. I've still got quite a bit to get through. So let's